All right, so here we go. I think what we'll do is we'll just get started here. Boy, we have a routine here Monday through Thursday, and then we get to Flex Friday, and out goes my pacing, and I pushed my advisory up to almost 9 o'clock, and so I got to work on my pacing here. But by the time I get my pacing down, we know when we come back from spring break, we'll be in a different scenario, different model perhaps, and just got to readjust my pacing and all that stuff. All right, so here we go. Welcome to those. And so hopefully your Friday has been a good start. And so today I just want to continue with looking at authoritarian states. And yesterday we put some closure to Adolf Hitler, and we did some evaluating. And I think on a scale of 1 to 10, Adolf Hitler is falling in around an 8 on the scale of being an authoritarian. And that would probably be consistent with historians as well in their views of Adolf Hitler as an authoritarian. And if you want, just quickly as a review here, as I have on my agenda, feel free to put into the chat, one word or phrase that you have that can describe Hitler. So if you think about the past 4 days or what you have known, in addition to the past 4 days, just as a review, just throw in, one word or one phrase that could define what you think is Adolf Hitler. Infamous, all right? I see the word infamous out there. And it's okay if we get some duplications, you might think, for instance, that he's evil. If we think of Adolf Hitler on the IB learner profile, that's something that I've done in the past, is have us look at where these authoritarians fall on the scale of that learner profile for an IB learner, where we're looking at inquirers and knowledgeable and thinkers and communicators and principled and open-minded, caring, risk takers, balanced and reflective. I mean, they're all risk takers. Adolf Hitler was a risk taker. I don't think he was very open-minded though. All right, so infamous, controlling. Think about that. And also think about, as we get to Joseph Stalin, a word or a phrase that's going to reflect that individual as well. As I had perhaps stated yesterday, Hitler and Stalin have something in common. Both of them were Time Man of the Year. And so you can see Joseph Stalin right there on the Time magazine. Okay, so work on my pacing here. I've got a couple things. I have a video clip here on Joseph Stalin that I would like to jump into, and then just a few notes, and I'll try to be brief on my notes here. I've got to get this thing done by 9:45. And then just know that your new homework assignment out there, it's the focus questions on Stalin, and it's going to be dealing with his methods of consolidating his power. And I think sometimes we always look at him as being very, very hardcore, and he is extremely manipulative, and he finds ways legally and also perhaps illegally in terms of ways that he is going to consolidate and maintain his power. And then just as a reminder also, deadlines for submitting any missing work is Wednesday of next week here. So with that, I want to switch over here and have a little video clip here, kind of introduce the man of steel, Joseph Stalin. And so let me get that going.
The President's Day sales event is terms of ruthlessness, bloodlust, Stalin remains one of the greatest villains of the 20th century.
Yosef Jukashvili was born on December 18, 1879. He later changed his name to Stalin, meaning man of steel.
Stalin had a very harsh childhood in terms of poverty, and he had a tough life as a young man. Rabin was very quickly attracted to radical movements and causes.
Between 1902 and 1913, Stalin was imprisoned 8 times by the Russian secret police.
Stalin's rise to power started after the Russian Revolution of 1917, when the Bolsheviks deposed the Tsar and created a communist society.
Lenin died in 1924, and there was a big struggle about the succession of Lenin. Stalin eventually took over in a very complex maneuver that really showed his master skills as a manipulator of men.
Under Stalin, Russia became the second largest industrial economy in the world. It was all planned economies, 5-year plans, and if you didn't play by his rules, you went off to a labor camp, or you were summarily executed in some fashion.
3 million kulaks died as a result of Stalin's policies in the early 1930s. Now, he did increase the amount of food that was being produced, but at what cost?
During what many historians term Stalin's reign of terror, no one was safe from his ambition. His forced industrialization led to countless millions of deaths, and the worst man-made famine in human history.
Just before World War II, Hitler and Stalin signed a non-aggression pact. That fell apart in June of 1941 when Hitler invaded the Soviet Union.
When the Germans turned and began to invade Russia, they underestimated Joe Stalin. The siege of Stalingrad was so great there was no food on either side. So the German soldiers would give little children who were residents of Stalingrad a crust of bread if they would fill their canteens from the Volga River. And as the children came back into Stalingrad, they were shot by Stalin snipers. That's how he consolidated his power. The most feared man in Russia, and with very good reason.
The Soviet Union lost an estimated 20 million people during World War II, more than any other nation. During the Big Three conferences, Stalin demanded much of Eastern Europe as compensation.
Stalin established an Iron Curtain from the Baltic to the Adriatic Sea. The Soviet Union was a major superpower with the potential of a nuclear arsenal in 1949. So that meant he had brought the Soviet Union from a minor regional power in Europe to a global superpower.
On March 5th, 1953, Joseph Stalin died.
Stalin is regarded by many Russian citizens as a great man. They had enormous pride in what he did for their country. He raised it to a level that it had not been before. He was mostly feared. He gave us the KGB. He gave us the Soviet labor camps. He gave us summary executions. We don't know how many people died at his hand in his own country for both reasons that were real and imagined, because they did not play by Stalin's rules.
I think Stalin's image today is increasingly concentrated around his role as one of the greatest mass murderers of the 20th century.
All right, so we just looked at Adolf Hitler, and we evaluated him as a kind of like an 8 on the scale. And just that last bit by some of those historians, they're going to say that Joseph Stalin, in many ways, is equally, if not greater, of an authoritarian than Adolf Hitler. So I think as we look at over these next few days, analyze and take a look at Joseph Stalin, does he compare with Hitler, and are there areas that he perhaps may excel, and ultimately perhaps may be even a stronger authoritarian? Any feedback, any thoughts about what you just saw in that video clip? About the Man of Steel.
I found it interesting that he would literally shoot the children that were trying to help his soldiers.
Well, yeah, you know, that's extraordinary to think about that. But in some ways, you know, it's about that absolute control, even to that level, and what he's willing to do. But it is extraordinary. What perhaps is even more extraordinary when we think of Joseph Stalin and how he takes the Soviet Union to another level, as Russians reflect on this time period, the time period of Russian history, you know, 70% give look at this time period as a positive time period for the Soviet Union and for Russia. And so Joseph Stalin is definitely getting a revision, or a revisit, I shouldn't say revision. And about 51% of the people in Russia actually look at Stalin positive. And so when I said 70% of the Soviet era, I mean, they looked at the Soviet era as a very positive era for them. But then we also got to look at, too, you know, when we look at the communist state that's created, the communist state in many ways is not that much different in terms of control of than that of the czars and the czarinas. And so Russians and the various republics that made up the Soviet Union in many ways have experienced that. And so democracy and all that is relatively new ideas to them. All right, started going off on different tangents there. So what I want to do today is really establish how Stalin rises to power here. And a big difference between Stalin's rise to power and Hitler's rise to power, in that Hitler had created, in many ways, him and his Nazi associates created the Nazi state, where Joseph Stalin, the framework is already there. And so he has just moved in, and now he's going to take it to the Soviet Union to another level. Now, the guy that he takes over for is Lenin. And it's under Lenin that one-party state is created. And so I do have a copy of these notes in Schoology, so you can download them if you want, follow along, take your own notes, or just sit back and listen to me talk about Stalin's rise to power. Now, Vladimir Lenin is considered the founder of the Soviet Union. He gives a political form to communism. Communism, remember, is a reaction to capitalism in the 19th century. And didn't really have a political body of ideas to it until we look at the Bolshevik Revolution here, which is considered the October Revolution, and it is the second revolution that had occurred in 1917. The first one that was in March or February, depends on which calendar you're looking at, where the imperial government falls, and then October or November, again, depending on which calendar that you're following, the Bolshevik Party had taken power. And they claim that because of their success, that gave them the power to create an absolute, in some ways, have an absolute right to govern in Russia. And so they're going to represent the will of the proletariat, which basically means workers. Okay, and so from 1917 to 1922, Vladimir Lenin and the communists, or the Bolsheviks will just simply change and become communists. The name, it's all about name. And they'll work on consolidating their power. And during this time period, it was a major challenge to their authority, since one would say that they represent a minority will in in Russia, and then what becomes the Soviet Union, and then they get the means to control power, and then they infuse that throughout Russia and the Soviet society here. So this was going to be a major challenge to their authority, the Civil War. You're going to have foreign intervention here, internal factions within the Communist Party, as well as other challenges. And there was a severe economic crisis going on, but still by 1922, the communists are in full control of the government. And so Lenin can now work on creating the single party state. And a key element of it is democratic centralism. This is going to be a key element to the communist state, as well as to Lenin's control. This is how he's going to put his stamp on the Communist Party in the Soviet Union here. And really what we look at, democratic centralism, is it's about the degree of control. True democracy, according to Lenin, lies in party members' obedience to the authority and instructions of the leaders. And the leaders in the Soviet Union, Vladimir Lenin is part of it, but there is a group known as the Politburo. And this is like Council of Elders. These are hard party members that will be considered like the vanguard. And the thought, the control, all that is going to come from them. So part of democratic centralism is you just got to have this obedience to the party leaders. And that the Bolsheviks, they know what's best. They know what's best. And so what we have here is the dictatorship of the proletariat. There can be discussions of various aspects on an issue, but at the end of the day, there needs to be obedience. And so part of that democratic centralism is also his authoritarian rule and what that looks like. So the CPSU, it's the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, and Soviet just means like council or people. And so that is the only party. So there's your single party. Cheka, which is a form of secret police. And so what we have here is this organization that's going to help keep people in line, very similar to we'll say the Gestapo. And eventually the Cheka is going to become the KGB. Factionalism is banned, so there cannot be any break from the party line. And so that idea of factionalism is going to be used down the road by Stalin to his advantage. Of course, purges and showcase trials, you got to get rid of your opposition. And some of that opposition could be within the Communist Party, but it can also be getting rid of those other parties that had been there at that first revolution, and then trying to maintain their existence after that second revolution. So those socialist revolutionaries, they're going to have to go. Showcase trials of various members of the clergy as well. Now, they are creating a communist state, so it's left-leaning. And so that means there's going to probably be some nationalization. And what that is they're nationalizing the private industries. Under a communist state, private enterprise typically is under the control of the communist government, central planning. And if Lenin is going to take the Soviet Union really from that agrarian state to a industrial state, nationalization needs to occur in order for that planning to happen. NEP, which is a new economic policy, and that is going to be the means to do that rapid industrialization. There is some socialist capitalist elements to it, because there does need to be a little boost in industrialization. But once they get to that level, then they can start pulling back from that, again, that capitalist or privatization. Of course, cultural revolution has to happen. You got to get the people on the right frame of thinking here. And so culture was to be shaped to how the communists want it to be. And they'll send around throughout the Soviet Union little traveling shows to get out the propaganda of what is this new Soviet state and what this new man is going to look. And of course, Vladimir Lenin is going to try to export his brand of communism. And so an organization known as the Comintern is going to be created here. And so is this instrument that's going to try to promote global communist revolutions that for a moment seems to spread in places like Eastern Europe and even trying to get into the Western democracies as well. You know, the Communist Party is going to form in places like England and France and even in the United States we'll have that. Now, Vladimir Lenin, though, his health is going to begin to fail him. And by 1924, Vladimir Lenin will die, and there'll be a power struggle. And so Stalin is going to emerge as a leading contender in that power struggle. And that power struggle also is going to include Leon Trotsky. So those are two important names here when you look at this power struggle. Now, Joseph Stalin, what was his role in the 1917 revolutions here? If you were going to get into the inner circle of the Politburo and the Communist Party, you need to have some type of role in the 1917 revolution. And so one could look at his role in those revolutions is more of behind the scenes. He comes to Petersburg, St. Petersburg, which it becomes Petrograd, which becomes Leningrad in 1917. And he joins the communist newspaper's staff, Pravda, where he plays a very active role in that newspaper. It's the newspaper party. It's the Communist Party's newspaper. Very much like, you know, for the Nazis, Der Angriff was an important publication for the Nazis here. So he has that role, but then he also is elected, or he does have some other minor roles, but they're not really leading roles in the October Revolution that really showcases Lenin and Trotsky. So once the communists are successful with that October Revolution, and I'm going to refer to them as communists, I'm switching from Bolsheviks to communists here. So after that revolution, he does have some moments where it's pretty tense between him and Lenin, but he still finds ways to stay into that inner circle. And between 1917 and 1924, Stalin actually is going to become rather powerful. He is going to have a variety of roles and responsibilities, and that's going to amass him a lot of influence. All right, so if we're going to look for factors that allow for him to emerge as a leading contender and eventually the leader of the Soviet Union, we have to look at what he has done between 1917 and 1924. He is head of the People's Commissar for Nationalities, which means he's in charge of officials in the various regions throughout the Soviet Union. He's the liaison officer between the Politburo and Orgbureau, which is very important because that means he can monitor party policy and personnel. He's the head of the Workers and Peasants Inspectorate, which gives him overseeing many of the different government departments. And then by 1922, he is elected by the Politburo, the General Secretary of the Communist Party. So very influential. He basically can help mold and shape party policy as well. All these positions give him the power of patronage. So that basically means he can appoint individuals to different positions. And what does that really mean? If he can appoint people to different positions, down the road, he can rely on them to support him. So that's going to be very, very critical as he emerges out of this power struggle, and then he wants to consolidate his power. He can rely on those individuals that he appointed to different positions because they owe him something. Now, Lenin dies in 1924, and Joseph Stalin got very close to Lenin by that point, and he was able to actually monitor Lenin's health as it was getting near his end. And that was viewed as concerning by some individuals as well. But he's found a way to amass a lot of positions and get very close to Lenin by 1924. Now, I have a little thing there that says the suppression of Lenin's testament. Now, does anyone know what a testament is? I've been talking forever here. Anyone know what a testament is? I used to go through a lot of old Park High textbook yearbooks, and their senior classes always would put testaments in there. Testaments are kind of like wills. And so Lenin had put together a will in some sort by, he started putting it together about 1922, 1923, making some additions and all that stuff. Lenin, he had very, very strong, unshakable support. And so there was no doubt as long as he was leader. But once his health started failing, the thought was, who's going to be the leader? Well, in his last testament or last will and testament and some additions to it, he spoke about, or he wrote about, his views of Stalin and Trotsky. And here is what Lenin had said about Stalin and Trotsky, and think about what kind of reactions that you might have or thoughts about that. Comrade Stalin, having become general secretary, has concentrated enormous power in his hands. I'm not sure that he always knows how to use that power with sufficient caution. On the other hand, Comrade Trotsky, as was proved by his struggle against the Central Committee in connection with the question of the People's Commissar of Ways and Communications, is distinguished not only by his exceptional abilities, personally he is, to be sure, the most able man in the present Central Committee, but also by his too far-reaching self-confidence and disposition to be too much attracted by the pure administrative side of affairs. In a postscript to this testament, Lenin put in some other thoughts about Stalin. Stalin is too rude, and this fault, entirely supportable in relations among us communists, becomes insupportable in the office of the General Secretary. Therefore, I propose to the comrades, find a way to remove Stalin from that position and appoint to another man who is all respected, differs from Stalin only in superiority, namely more patient, more loyal, more polite, more attentive to comrades, and less capricious. So what do we think of Lenin's testament here? Just those little extracts.
He doesn't want Stalin to be in power.
What do we got? So what do we know? Any reactions? Can either put it into the chat or unmute. Yeah, he doesn't want Stalin to be in power. He doesn't want Stalin in power, and he's trying to urge his comrades not to give him the power and find an alternative. The alternative could have been Trotsky, but Trotsky, the problem with him is he's too much of an intellectual and he doesn't want to pay attention to the details. One might say he's an elite or he's aloof in some ways. Stalin, he is many of the characteristics that Lenin talks about. The problem is Lenin is running out of time. And in my notes, I have the suppression of the Lenin Testament. The Council of Elders of the Politburo decided after they read the Testament that it can't be published. There's no way. And their concern perhaps is it's going to create too much division and maybe it might hurt people's feelings. The Testament doesn't come out until 1956. Right, 1956. Anyone know who the leader of the Soviet Union was in 1956? Maybe you can quickly GTS it. It's the only guy who's not actually was given the right to be buried in Red Square. Nikita Khrushchev. Nikita Khrushchev. And Nikita Khrushchev, when he took over for Joseph Stalin after a power struggle as well, worked on what we call de-Stalinization, kind of in some ways toning down some of the rhetoric and the instruments of Stalin's regime. So the suppression of the Testament is critical. And so here Stalin has amassed a lot of power through positions, and you've got the suppression of this Testament. So he's going to be able to emerge from a power struggle by 1929. You could look at that. You could probably go to 1927. So when communist leaders die, in this case, like Lenin, there's always going to be a power struggle. When Stalin dies, there's going to be a power struggle. When Mao dies, there's going to be a power struggle. So trying to figure out who is going to become that next leader is always a little bit difficult. Stalin, though, he is going to emerge. All right. So with that, I'm just going to end my notes there. And so going back here, your homework for Monday is the focus questions, and you're gonna dig in a little bit more of that, his methods of becoming the single leader of the Soviet Union. All right, so you have that. So work on that over the weekend, but also make sure that you are taking time to enjoy the weekend. The weather probably is going to be nice again. All right, so with that, does anyone have anything good for the cause here? All right, before I cut you loose for the weekend, just bear in mind also that next week, next Friday, we will have our last assessment for the trimester. It's on authoritarians, and that is already in terms of you can already get access to the review sheet that goes along with that, and the format of that assessment is going to be very similar to that of the causes and effects of 20th century wars. So I also want to put that on your radar too. So we'll take care of Stalin, but you have one more assessment too. All right. So with that, I wish you a wonderful day and have a great weekend. And you are free to exit or stay on and ask me some questions.